In this video, I'm going to talk about the parables some more, but I'm going to do a comparison that's going to create a huge reveal with respect to esoteric secrets from antiquity, as far as I can see. I'll show you, you look for yourself. It's going to take a little bit to unfold it. It's not super easy to see. So if you're interested in something that is quite different, welcome to the channel. My name is Dan Paulson. What I am doing is revealing that there is a common core spiritual teaching in religions and mythologies from antiquity. It's just nested in the most bizarre ways, but it is so big and so huge, it's hard to see. There's a certain process that I've hit on that allows me to interpret them that begins to reveal something different. Now, if you're on board with this, you know that I've watched a lot of videos with like Bart Ehrman and other biblical scholars, a lot of New Testament biblical scholars who talk about all the shards, the fragments, the pieces, the thousands of parts, the examples of things from antiquity, how they're worded a little bit different, how that they, who was first? What was the origin? Was it the Jesus story first and then the other stuff copied? How did that go? Was it just the same story being sent word of mouth, and that's why it got written down and they sounded different? What is going on? Who came first? What I'm going to suggest is this. They're sharing a teaching. Who's first is that shared teaching, because that shared teaching predates anything that comes from Jesus. These are simply updated versions of an old teaching, and that is what I am going to reveal. It's a spiritual teaching. It's an inner path. It would be called a component as part of the hero's journey, which is not a story about life, but as far as turning inward, the hero's path, as far as turning inward to heal oneself from one's life and looking inward and finding inner peace by looking inward instead of outward. When that transition is made, and that transition is required in order to interpret these, then something else comes online. First of all, I will suggest from antiquity that thousands, millions of people without media, and had entire lives without that, were using this as media. There's something very important in storytelling. That was, imagine life today without media. It's difficult to get out of that, but all right. So they're doing something, and they're not just telling things plain language. They're telling stories. A parable is like a fable or something like that. There's proverbs, psalms. There's all kinds of ways of making little poems or things that hold a teaching. A parable is a succinct didactic, that's a teaching story, in prose or verse that illustrates one or more instructive lessons or principles. It differs from a fable in that fables employ animals, plants, inanimate objects, or forces of nature as characters, whereas parables have human characters. A parable is a type of metaphorical analogy. Okay, that's what we're going to do. I'm going to grab one parable and start taking a look at something, and then I'm going to show how that parable becomes now restructured to sound different or to perhaps go to a different audience, yet it's still carrying that same nested teaching in a different way. But before we do that in the verse, in the Bible itself, what I'm going to do is create the idea in an example here, in a very simple example of what I believe that they're doing. I'm going to take a teaching that is a very common teaching from antiquity. This is actually why we go on the inner path. We have some kind of pain that is cycling through. We're tired of a life. What the heck? We finally turn in and do something because something is inside of us, and we realize that what we're hanging on to from the past is becoming our problem. That's what we have to do. We have to let go of that. We have to forgive. We have to somehow disengage our feelings from what has happened to us. And that's a very tough thing. So people aren't going to do that. You want to pass that around. You want to make sure that that is known. So you might say something like an anchored ship cannot sail. In a body of work, this is meant as analogous verbiage to hold the idea that I'm the ship, and as long as I'm holding on to something, I cannot sail free. That's what it means on my psyche. But I've taken that idea and flipped it outward and created analogous verbiage to carry that somebody has to know, oh, I'm the ship and the anchor is me holding on to something. And if I want to, you see how that goes. However, that's pretty boring. It goes spread around. You need to keep mixing that up. It's like, oh, how many ways can we tell this? And it might go to somebody else who goes, I don't even know what ships are. I'm not telling that story. So you might say, oh, the goat tied outside the tent cannot escape. You might do something modern by saying the balloon tied to the to the child's finger cannot float away or something. And in all cases, what we're doing is encoding the idea in different ways. They all sound different, but they're all encoding the idea that is as long as something is tied to something or hooked to something, it can't get away from it. You see that it's the same teaching in all cases, but they sound different. And I'm going to suggest that that is exactly what they're doing here in these parables. Who's first? Those are outer shells. Those are teachings. The Jesus, all of that stuff are carriers for the teaching. Okay, with that having been said, we ready to jump into it? Okay, what I'm going to do is first show some examples. And the way I'm going to do this is not announce where each one is from. As I bring up the panels, I've got in red across the top where it's sourced from. But I think if you keep throwing in the numbers and announcing and things like that, it disrupts the flow of what our minds need to see. So I'm just going to read through this stuff, and you can see as I move along if you're interested or you want to look back later where they come from, and you can look them up yourself. All right, let's jump right into it. This is going to be a very common parable, and I'm going to be pulling this from the Bible and the Gospel of Thomas. And who is first? The teaching. Okay, you'll recognize this as the shepherd and the sheep. What do you think? If a shepherd has 100 sheep and one of them has gone astray, does he not leave the 99 on the mountain and go in search of the one that went astray? And if he finds it, truly I tell you, he rejoices over it more than over the other 99. Next, so he told them this parable. Which one of you, having 100 sheep and losing one of them, does not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the one that is lost till he finds it? When he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders and rejoices. Next, Jesus said the kingdom is like a shepherd who had 100 sheep. One of them, the largest, went astray. He left the 99 and looked for that one until he found it. When he had gone to such trouble, he said to the sheep, I care for you more than the 99. Okay, now verses, when they're made like this, there's various layers of interpretation that could be made. There's one of them that is just allows people to float all over the place. If I go back to my example and say the anchored ship will not sail, somebody might look at that literally and say, well, yeah, that's duh. That's what anchors are for, so that your ship doesn't float away. That's all they get out of it. Somebody else who realizes it's a metaphor goes, oh, I can place myself into that story. That represents me. I am the ship, and as long as I'm hanging on to something, I can't sail free. Another person might come along and look at that same verse based on what they have, and without any guidance or direction or specific use of interpretation, they're going to float with what they believe it is. Somebody else can look at that and say, I was an orphan. My life was trash. I had nothing. I was wandering all over the world stuck. Now that I'm anchored to something, I'm safe in port. Therefore, it's better to be anchored than it is to sail free. You have now created two different interpretations of the same verse because you're not using it in the psyche. It's looking outward. What do we see in religion? 33 to 45,000 different denominations. Why? They're not using it in their psyche. They're looking outward with it. What happens if we turn it into the psyche? Then all of these components become us again. If I am on the search, the way this verse works, I am the one that is, well, actually, let's just go and interpret. Let me grab the first one. What do you think? All right, we just leave that alone. If a shepherd has got 100 sheep, now, if I am looking at the story, interpreting it, I am suddenly the shepherd. This story is about somebody else when I'm looking at it from a distance. When I make it mine, I become the shepherd. If a shepherd has 100 sheep and one of them has gone astray, does he not leave the 99 on the mountains and go in search of the one that went astray? And if he truly finds it, or if he finds it, truly I tell you, he rejoices over it more than over the other 99. Okay, what I want to talk about here is something in a bigger step back position. When we look at our life, what we find out is we started out very simple, we became very complicated, and we want to get back to our simple selves. This is a teaching that says we have all of these, we have accumulated all of these things. We now have 100 sheep. The one that's missing is the one big one, the one important one, the one that is gone, the one that was there to begin with, the one that we had in the Garden of Eden, our happy selves, our uncovered, unashamed. Life hadn't hit us yet. We hadn't judged life yet. What we have going on right here is that one big sheep is that one place we want to get back to. This is like, 7 or 3 or righteousness or the Garden of Eden before first sin. That one sheep is what we want, which means inside that's one thing that we want to live through. We don't want to live through 100 things. We want to live through one thing. Our lives have become complicated. Think of it this way, analogous terms. I am the shepherd, and the sheep are all of the things that I have gathered in life. And there's one thing that is important, and most of the things are not. Okay, let's move on to the next one and see what reveals there. Which one of you, having 100 sheep and losing one of them, does not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the one that is lost till he finds it? See, same thing. You're leaving all of the other stuff and going to look for the one thing that you really want. When he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders and rejoices. Now, this one has a little different element that I see. I don't know if it's meant to be there, but I like it there. When he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders. We carry our load in life. We carry our life experience. We burden ourselves with our life experiences that we don't resolve. When we do resolve those and we get our one happiness back, we lay it on our shoulders. That becomes our burden, but our burden is a good thing. Our burden is joy. That's a good burden to have, isn't it? So when we find it, we become that and we rejoice. We have a good life. This is we got the kingdom of heaven within. Jesus said the kingdom is like a shepherd who had 100 sheep. So now we're finding the kingdom, this place, this kingdom is a metaphoric location, which really means your mind, your life experience, the way your life is. Your life is like your life is like yourself, and you have a bunch of complexity. One of them, that first one, is gone. You leave all of the other stuff, and you go back and look for that one. And when you have gone to so much trouble, you say to the sheep, I care for you more than the 99. Okay, when I look at this, I see those common threads in there. I interpret them that way because that's how they fit in the psyche. When you begin to play around with them, you realize there's like this core teaching that they're doing constantly. They're continually shifting the analogous verbiage that they're using to carry it as a puzzle network that is monstrously big, but it all plays out up in the mind. Let's move on to the next verse and see what emerges. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was thrown into the sea and caught fish of every kind. When it was full, they drew it ashore, sat down, and put the good into baskets, but threw out the bad. Next, Jesus said, the man is like a wise fisherman who cast his net into the sea and drew it up from the sea full of small fish. Among them, the wise fisherman found a fine, large fish. He threw all the small fish back into the sea and chose the large fish without difficulty. Whoever has ears to hear, let him hear. That little end on there is a code for pay attention, secret teaching. Okay, yeah, we know that all of it is a secret teaching. Okay, if I go back to the first one, I look at this and go, it's a little bit different. The one in the Bible it doesn't have a very specific person. It uses they. They drew it ashore. You have to know you are they. In the same way, in the Gospel of Thomas one, you have to know you are the wise fisherman. Whoever it is that is drawing it up, but you can see that it's teaching the same story. Only, like in my example of where I said, an anchored ship cannot sail, now we've got to teach that to, somebody different. So we're going to change the way it sounds and say that the goat tied outside the tent cannot escape. That's what we just saw here. We just saw a transition from the sheep and finding the one for the shepherd. Now that story is being structured for the fisherman. The same nested lesson is in there. You're seeking that one thing. You want to go back. It interprets the same way as the other ones. And if you're with me and you're on board with what I'm doing, then we've cracked into something. Let's take a look at another one here. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls. On finding one pearl of great value, he went and sold all that he had and bought it. Jesus said the kingdom of the Father is like a merchant who had a consignment of merchandise and who discovered a pearl. That merchant was shrewd. He sold the merchandise and bought the pearl alone for himself. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which someone found and hid. Then in his joy, he goes and sells all that he has to buy that field. Okay, let's go through them in the same way. Back to the first one. The kingdom of heaven is like a merchant. I am the merchant. The kingdom of heaven is a good place. I'm in search of fine pearls. That's something high value, but it's not pearls. That's an analog for, something that is good and valuable. On finding one pearl of great value, he went and sold all that he had and bought it. So you want that one thing and you want to get rid of everything else is the basic lesson right there. Sounds pretty strange for merchandise, but it sounds right on for if once we translate it and put it in the psyche, yep, there it fits. But we're treating every verse the same way. We're not doing anything different. We're just changing the analogs. They go to the same location. Jesus said the kingdom of the Father is like a merchant who had a consignment of merchandise. I am the merchant. I have a consignment of merchandise. I have a life experience. And who discovered a pearl? I know somewhere inside of me is happiness. That merchant was shrewd. He sold the merchandise and bought the pearl. I got rid of everything else I had and kept the pearl alone for myself. Next, the kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field. When someone found and hid, I am someone. Then his joy, I am that consciousness. You are anybody, male or female, doesn't matter. Then in his joy, he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. The kingdom of heaven, inner peace, is like treasure hidden in a field. The field is my mind. That is my experience, where I reside, where all my stuff is. The treasure is hidden there in that field. That pureness that I want is there in the back. Life has gotten in the way, which someone found and hid. Then in his joy, he goes and sells all that he has. That's all the stuff that's gotten in the way, and buys that field. We've got it back. You see that? Okay. I want to look at a couple of other things. I'm going to throw the goofiest parallel I can think of at you right now, and that's back to Jason and the Argonauts. What is Jason doing? Jason needs to go. He has lost control of the kingdom. Pelias took over. Pelias represents himself, and Jason needs to go back and defeat Pelias, his early self, in order to get his land back, his kingdom. What we're seeing here are incredibly small variations of that same thing. Jason is getting rid of all of the demons and the things in the way that are necessary for him to get his land back, and that's what we're seeing here. We're keeping one big important thing and getting rid of all of the other stuff, all of the things that we have accumulated in life. All right, before ending this video, I want to do another exercise. How versatile is everybody? I'm good with any material. What I'm going to do is take the 3 verses that came from Matthew, the 3 parables, stack them together, and then I'm going to match them up with something that is from the Tao Te Ching, some Chinese works from 500 years prior to Jesus. So let's just take a look at something and talk about it real quick. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field, which someone found and hid. Then, in his joy, he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls. On finding one pearl of great value, he went and sold all that he had and bought it. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was thrown into the sea and caught fish of every kind. When it was full, they drew it ashore, sat down, and put the good into baskets, but threw out the bad. Okay, as we went through these, remember, we had to make these parts of us. We're turning inward with these, and when we're throwing that net, we're throwing that into the net of our past life, of what we have inside of us. When we're doing those, when we're looking for the pearls, the land, all of that is there. Right there is where that is. Okay, so I'm going to jump up to the Tao Te Ching, some Lao Tzu. We join spokes together in a wheel, but it is the center hole that makes the wagon move. We shape clay into a pot, but it is the emptiness inside that holds whatever we want. We hammer wood for a house, but it is the inner space that makes it livable. We work with being, but non-being is what we use. Okay, they sound different until one practices enough with it. The idea here for the first 3 parables, there's like parallel things going on. Here's 3 examples of what the kingdom is like. Figure out all 3 of these. Make these 3 match up. You got it. Here's 3 things to figure out. We have the similar thing going on in a very short verse style with the Tao. If we look through this one, we make this who and what we are. There are component parts in here. There is a wheel. a wagon that's moving, a whole. There's nouns and verbs in here that become who and what I am. When we join spokes in a wheel, we become the wheel. Joining spokes together in a wheel means we are living life, creating our life. But it's the center whole that makes the wagon move. It is what we have inside of us that determines the quality of the rotation of the life cycles. We shape clay into a pot, but it is the emptiness inside that holds whatever we want. I am the clay pot. You are the clay pot. We shape clay into a pot as we live life. Unbeknownst to us, we mold ourselves into that pot. But it is the emptiness inside. It is what we have inside of us that holds whatever we want. And that doesn't mean just what we want, but what we don't want too. It's holding what we don't want to deal with. It holds all of our life experiences. We hammer wood for a house, but it is the inner space that makes it livable. I am the house. Hammering wood for a house means I am building my life throughout my life experiences. And the inner space that is inside of my structure is what makes it livable. How is it livable for me? Then it ends up with we work with being. That is, we work with life experiences, but non-being is what we use. When we are not paying attention to life, what is acting out in the background is what is there. You see, there's 4 verses there that flow together. There's 3 parables that sometimes you'll find structure in material like this as you're studying and looking through it. There's things that are like this, this, this. If you can figure out how all of those are the same thing when you get done, you're like, okay, I've got it interpreted. It's almost like a little block of, I don't know what. It's a verbal puzzle thing. I'm finding things like this. At any rate, I wanted to show that. So there's a couple of layers of things going on here. It is much deeper than just carrying a story about salvation. There's some stuff in here that's very thick. And I think that the reason why there are so many examples is because this goes all the way back to clay tablets from Sumeria and the Babylonian, the creation myth, Gilgamesh material, all of that. This type of style, when you work it through and interpret it, it was appearing all the way back then. It's in Jewish material, it's in Greek material, Chinese, Hindu, all of it is structured on this. There's one truth. There is a core inner pathway to inner peace, nested in everything that won't lead you to inner peace on the outside, but that inner peace pathway is flipped outward, and their individual stories are created in these big blocks of storytelling, adventures, battles, wars, all kinds of things. And that's what it is. It's a very simple thing once you extract it and turn it inward. It's like there's one inner path and a million ways of obscuring that path. Anybody holding on to one of those things, if they learn how to use it, it turns inward. You become the hero. You become the person. You become the component part of the story. This is living verse. This is I am that. All right, I'll end the video now. I hope that was fun and interesting. Do you see what's going on there in the background? It's much simpler. It's really a way to turn it inward and shift those analogs. It just has that's what has to be done. That analog shift. Okay. Yeah. If someone's got bats in their belfry, we know what that means. That's what they're doing. Every bit of it is like that. We just have to understand what the analogs mean. And we do that by understanding there's a template and we can kind of fit them on the template. We see we're reverse engineering what they did. That's what I feel. I also feel that this is knowledge that is known. I believe that this is so predominant now that I see it, that it is known in the world, but it's kept secret from us. And I don't like that. I don't. Control bastards in the background someplace. Okay. I guess humanity needs that, don't they? But it's not working too good right now. No, it's falling apart. Okay, the path inward is going to be obscured by the destruction coming from outward. Everybody facing outward. Hope the video is interesting until I got depressing there at the end. Sorry about that. Please like and subscribe. Add any comments or questions down below. We're on a Discord server now. I'll post the link below. Hope to see you there. Hope the video was enjoyable and interesting, and I'll see you in the next one.